Welcome back to Only Talk Sports. And tonight, sorry about the long delay, but we finally are live and we have Austin Williams of Sports Talk with Austin here to talk about his favorite team, the Louisville Cardinals, and how they're going to do in college football in 2023. They've got a new head coach. They've got an interesting roster. It's going to be very interesting to talk about as well with everything they've got going on. And again, there's no one else better to talk about the Louisville Cardinals than Austin Williams. Thanks for coming on, and what are your first thoughts about talking about the Louisville Cardinals this year?
I appreciate you having me on, Jeffrey. Always fun. My first initial thoughts about Louisville this season, I want to be optimistic, but you also have to have expectations and reality. Louisville, we're one of those teams where you would like to think, with the schedule that we've got, which we'll get to, we can maybe reach 9 wins, maybe even 10 if some things break our way. But, we haven't had this much hype around our team since Lamar Jackson. Everyone remembers him. He won the Heisman in 2016, and it was a lot of fun watching that team that year. But it's going to be very interesting. I think we have a lot of key players and breakout players that we're going to talk about. Going to be key pieces. I'm optimistic that Jeff Brohm's going to be a good head coach, but it ought to be interesting.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like I said, there's a lot of question marks all around with Louisville, but definitely there seems to be some positive, momentum going in the direction of Louisville because they've been kind of up and down the last few seasons. They've never really got it all together with Scott Satterfield. They were really good with Lamar Jackson. They had, that was kind of like, I wouldn't say their heyday. It wasn't even that long ago, but it was really good seasons with him, and they were a really talked about program. But it just wasn't as much with Scott Satterfield, despite the fact that Malik Cunningham was really solid as well and was putting up really good stats, but just they were not the same level of the team. But they have a new quarterback in town, and it is a very familiar face for Jeff Brohm with Jack Plummer because Jack Plummer, he was the quarterback for the Purdue Boilermakers, and then he lost the job to Aiden O'Connell, and he went out to California, and has now decided to retransfer again to rejoin Jeff Brohm at Louisville. He's basically been announced as starting quarterback already. So, again, if you want to talk about Brock Domer, some of the other quarterbacks Louisville has, and if you think they'll have a shot maybe to supplant Jack Plummer, but he is, for now anyway, the starting quarterback for Louisville. How do you think he's going to do at Louisville this season?
I think for me, when I heard this move was made, I wasn't too thrilled about it because of his reputation at Cal. Because, yes, he had that great game against USC, but his overall history at Cal was not something to be remembered by. Because there'd be games, yes, he would look really solid, and he would throw the ball, and it'd be a perfect night for him. But then there's other nights where he'd be throwing picks and fumbling and just getting sacked. So I'm a little cautious because we have a really solid running game. I think that's going to help him what Cal did not have. We have an O-line, but it's one of those things, can Brohm take the turnovers out of him? Because there's been times where you look at his stat line and he's got like 10 touchdowns and is throwing almost 20 picks. And that's very concerning. And I think when you turn the ball over at the high rate that he did at Cal sometimes, you lose a lot of ball games easier that way. But I think since he's reunited with Brohm, I think it'll be much better. I feel like he'll be able to – there's a level of comfort there with him now. It's kind of like quarterback. If it's their former head coach or their assistant head coach, it makes it better. They understand, I'm familiar with his system. It's really good together. It's like Drew Brees and Sean Payton in the NFL. They always knew what was going to happen, or Brady and Belichick. It was always one of those things. They had that level of comfort together. And I feel like Plummer and Brohm have that very level of comfort together, very good level of comfort. I feel like if he can just not be a turnover disaster or be taking 20-yard sacks, I think we'll do okay. Me personally, I think Brock Domer is a better player. He can run, I think, better. He's less turnover prone. but Plummer does have more arm talent than Domer does. And then you've got Evan Conley, who's our third stringer. He's kind of more of your speed if you want to be a run team with the quarterback. Kind of Lamar Jackson type, just not as fast and not as flexible either. But it's just one of those things where I think overall, as long as, like I said, if you don't turn the ball over, I think we'll win some games. I don't think it's – hopefully Brohm can take what was a disaster at Cal and can transfer some good and use that arm to our advantage.
Yeah, definitely a lot of great points that you mentioned. I think one thing that hurt Jack Plummer at Cal was the fact that their offensive line did not, assist in any way, shape, or form. They were awful, unfortunately, and Jack Plummer was getting sat left and right. And it's not necessarily his fault because he's not a mobile quarterback. He can move a little bit in the pocket, but he's not really a runner like some quarterbacks that Louisville has had in the past, like Malik Cunningham, Lamar Jackson, fantastic runners. Jack Plummer, again, he can move in the pocket. He's not a statue, but at a team like Cal, it just did him no favors. With Purdue, he was good at Purdue, and he was able to battle Aiden O'Connell for a couple seasons for the job. He kept going back and forth, Jeff Brohm, with both of those quarterbacks, but he ultimately ended up going with Aiden O'Connell because he offered more upside, whereas Jack Plummer was more just a solid quarterback that didn't really make too many explosive plays. He could get you down the field. And I think that's what's going to happen at Louisville. He's not going to be explosive. He's not going to really do a lot that's going to knock your socks off, but he's going to just be solid. And I feel like as long as he doesn't throw too many picks, he's going to have a better offensive line. Like you said, he's going to have a better run game as well. Then I think plus he's a 6-year senior. He's older now. I mean, it's his last season of college football. He's older than Brock Domer. He's older than the other quarterbacks that Louisville has, which they'll probably get their shot eventually. I think Jack Plummer will do fine, but he is going to have to play well if good enough if Louisville is to have, possibly a better season than some people think. And the schedule definitely could help in that regard, but we will get to that in a minute. But first, before we do get to the schedule, we have Jeff Brohm himself, the new head coach in town, the guy that a lot of Louisville fans have been asking for, returning to his alma mater. He would not go to Louisville a few years ago. He stayed at Purdue, and he spurned the job, and people were upset, but he finally took the job, took the plunge, left Purdue, went back to Louisville, to his alma mater. And a lot of people are very high on this hire. A lot of people think that Jeff Brohm is going to be a slam dunk hire, but there is some question marks with that because you talk about like a Scott Frost going back to his alma mater, Nebraska. It did not work out. Different circumstances, maybe again with Louisville being in the ACC, easier schedule. Maybe Jeff Brohm will have a better shot to get the job done there. Plus, Louisville's in better shape than Nebraska was when Scott Frost took over. But what are the expectations, you think, for Jeff Brohm at Louisville? And do you think that he can have success right off the bat, and he will have a lot of success at his tenure at Louisville?
I think expectations for me personally compared to our fans. For me personally, when I heard about this hire, once again, I was optimistic. But what he did at Purdue, taking them to the Big Ten championship last year and getting them to where they got to, getting upsets over Ohio State and Michigan's of the world, great stuff. But there also is that part of they're like, beware of his clock management issues, not calling timeouts, or going forward on 4th and 3 on your side of the field. Be aware for those issues. It may come back to bite you in the butt, so to speak. And that's kind of what concerned me. Like, Scott Satterfield, he was aggressive, but if it wasn't on the opponent's side of the field, if we weren't nearing the end zone on their side, he wouldn't go for it as much. Brohm has been known to be a risk taker and be like, oh, you're at the Ohio State 20 and it's 4th and 1. Let's go for it. And I know Ohio State, sometimes you have to take those chances because it's Ohio State. You don't want to give them the ball. You want to eat the clock, and you just want to get out of there with a less of a beatdown or somehow win that game. But I just think that's a little concerning. But I think with the offense that we've got built in already, with a lot of key players coming back and a lot of players that we've added, especially on the offense. I think we're more better for the fact of we may not be in those situations as much. We may be able to move the ball just a little bit more. But Jeff Brohm, when he came back, I'm happy he decided to come back, decided to choose us again, and to play coach's alma mater. Excuse me. I'm just wondering, was this the right hire? Because with Scott Satterfield, there was all these rumors of, oh, he's looking at the South Carolina job. Oh, he's looking at this job over here, this job. And then when he gets questioned about it, oh, no, I wouldn't do that. I'm not going to do that to the program. I'm not going to do a Lincoln Riley. And then what happens? He did a Lincoln Riley. He went to our rival up north of Cincinnati. So much for that. But as it pertains to Jeff Brohm, I'm excited for what he brings to Louisville. I think as long as he can get us to 8 wins, 9 wins, like he did at Purdue, and maybe we are competing for the ACC, I would say that's where we need to be. I'm not going to say, oh my gosh, I'm not going to say we need to be New Year's Six playoff natty bound just yet. But as long as we're contending for ACCs and making good bowl games, I think that's the realistic expectation for me, and I think most Louisville fans. And plus, like you mentioned with Cal, same situation. Purdue was a dump when he got there. We're in a much better situation than we are. We got a little more NIL money. We can recruit a little better than Purdue. So he's not walking into as terrible a situation as he maybe would have when he walked in at Purdue, what he did walk in as say if he tried to walk in at Northwestern, because they're the hot topic. But you get the point, though. He's walking into a very good situation. He should have success quickly. It shouldn't be no 5-7, 4-8. It shouldn't be none of those. We should at least be going 7-5. I would think be the worst we should do with Jeff Brohm. But that's my expectations for him. Now, for you, Jeffrey, on the opposite side, not being a Louisville fan, just being a spectator, Tater, what do you think? Am I going too far with that, or am I spot on?
That's definitely a good question. Before I answer that, I really do appreciate Mark Rogers of the Voice of College Football. Just a quick drive-by. I hope you guys are good, keeping the good work, Jeffrey. Really appreciate that. Definitely glad that you were able to stop by. Me and Austin doing these interview. We did one with Indiana on his channel yesterday, doing this one right now for Louisville. But I really appreciate you for coming on. Voice of College Football says Jeff Brohm is a significant upgrade over Scott Satterfield. I definitely agree with that. And he also says, well, Purdue 9-39 in 4 seasons before Brohm, which is insane. Definitely Purdue was not doing very well at that time, but they got a lot better when Jeff Brohm took over. It took a couple years, but they really got that thing rolling pretty well. They weren't great, but they were a solid program. And again, thanks for stopping by, Mark. Really appreciate it. But to answer your question, Austin, I think that the expectations for Jeff Brohm at Louisville is about what you said. I mean, 8-4, 7-5, 8-4 most years is attainable, because the ACC and football lately anyway has just not been the greatest. I mean, you've got Clemson and Florida State. They're getting better now, and maybe Miami eventually will be back. Who knows? And North Carolina's been better. But outside of that, you don't have Virginia Tech. It's not Frank Beamer's Virginia Tech. Virginia is not as good as they were a few seasons ago when they were pretty solid. There's just a lot of programs struggling in the ACC. It's not an awful conference. There's good teams, but I think that helps Louisville because of the fact that he can come in with a program that's not in bad shape. It's not, a dumpster fire. And they've got some talented players, and they've got some pretty good NIL going on over at Louisville. Not elite, but it's good enough to get by. That 8-4 is not ridiculous. It's not unattainable. And it's a record that Louisville's had in the past. They can get back to it. And like you said, Purdue, they're in the West, which that's about to change, obviously, because the division's going away. But he was able to get to 8 wins at Purdue, even though they were in the West. And if he can do it at Purdue, he can probably do it at Louisville. And it's not guaranteed, because you talk about Scott Frost. Granted, he went from, UCF, which is a smaller school, to Nebraska, but that didn't work. You can't just say it's going to be a slam dunk that Jeff Brohm's going to come into Louisville and it's going to be great. There could be some up and down bumps down the road, but I do think it is more than likely that he will have success at Louisville. I don't think he's going to fail. I think he's going to do a solid job, but how good, I'm not sure. Definitely his ceiling's fairly high, but it's going to be really interesting. But next, to determine how they're going to do for this season, we got to preview the schedule. Not to go ahead and predict what they're going to do, but just to preview the schedule, look at these games. They've got a really interesting schedule that's very beneficial. There's a lot of sneaky good games, but you talk about the fact that there's a lot of teams that have hard schedules that make it very difficult for them to win games. Well, the good thing for Louisville is that they have a lot of teams that they can beat. That they have a lot of teams that they're about 50-50 with. I think that's really going to help, looking at these games. And they start out with a very winnable game. But for you all looking at this schedule, how do you feel about Louisville's 2023 schedule and how it sets up for the season?
So right off the bat, I want to point out to you, I do not like the fact that we go at NC State, then we get Notre Dame at home, and then we go at Pittsburgh. Woof. Yeah. And then to follow it up with a very good Duke team, oh boy. Yeah, the first half of the schedule up to Boston College, we could start 4-0. That's very attainable. Then everybody on from NC State to Duke is where the rough stretch really begins. And the important thing is here. Then after that, you get Virginia Tech. We should be able to handle business there. And then we get Miami and Kentucky. So it's very interesting. I will say if I was to give you a game-by-game prediction, which if you go check the ACC predictions out on my channel, I had us going 8-4 and 5-3 in conference. Not to spoil the segment for later, but first game of the season, Georgia Tech, very attainable win. Murray State, very attainable. I think we should win that. Indiana, I think we should win, but it could be also going the other way in favor of your Hoosiers, just for the fact of Tom Allen knows Jeff Brohm, and he knows what he likes to do, and that could be a big advantage in Indiana's favor. Mm-hmm. Boston College, they beat us last year, right? I think since they're coming to the Ville, I think we get them. At NC State, I don't think we're going to go up to Raleigh and beat them. I don't see that. Then Notre Dame, that's going to be the biggest game of our season, arguably, because if we want to be ranked at all, this more than likely is going to decide whether we're ranked or not. Because NC State, they could be ranked, could not, because last year they did get hit with the injury bug, and it caused them to drop out towards the end. Notre Dame, as long as they have no major slip-ups, they should be relatively in the top 15, maybe top 10, if they can win all the winnable games and then just lose the big three. And then at Pittsburgh, that's the game I'm not looking forward to, because for one simple reason. Let's say we beat Notre Dame. Then we got to go at Pitt. Are we going to be ready to play? And at Pitt, that is a tough environment. That's not talked about enough. Especially if it's at night. Oh boy. You're it's almost like going to LSU or going to Tuscaloosa at night. Not quite, but there's an environment there that you just have to be there to feel. Mm-hmm. Even Clemson has struggled in Pittsburgh, and they've been prominently dominant in the ACC, and Pitt's given them some games. It's very interesting. And then Duke, I mean, if we lose to Pitt, could we bounce back and beat Duke? Sure. But there's also the possibility of what if we lose and then we lose that one too. The schedule is very interesting. You get your breaks and then you don't. I think the two key games that I think are must-haves if we want to have a successful season is I think we need to beat Notre Dame, and I think we need to beat Kentucky. I think those are two games that will probably determine where we finish.
I mean, that's a great assessment of the schedule. I mean, people talk about that the schedule is easy, and it is when you compare it to other schedules around the country, that the teams that have ridiculously hard schedules, like an Ole Miss, they got a really hard schedule this year. You know, a lot of the Big Ten teams have hard schedules. It's a lot easier, but it doesn't mean that it's like a pushover schedule, like, oh, Louisville's going to be favored in almost every game. And maybe that's just a testament to the fact that Louisville's not a top-tier ACC team as of now anyway, but still, there are a lot of winnable games. There's barely a game on this schedule where you can say Louisville doesn't have a shot to win. I mean, even the Notre Dame game, it's at Louisville. They have a shot. They can win. And at Pitt and at NC State, they're not impossible, but they're still hard games. And like you said, the fact that those are back-to-back-to-back, that's not easy. Louisville could lose all three. They could win two of the three. You just never know. But like you said as well, there's other sneaky games. Kentucky, I mean, how good are they going to be? You know, they've struggled last couple of years, but Kentucky's still a pretty solid team. Stoops has done a good job there. Then you talk about at Miami. I mean, at Miami's an underrated game because Miami's a team that with their talent, they could beat Louisville. But the problem with Miami is that they're inconsistent, and sometimes they play down to their competition, and that could allow Louisville to win. So that's one of those games that you just have no idea. Plus, we don't even know how good these teams are going to look by that time. It's a late in the year game. Miami could be a lot better than we think, and that changes perception of that game. But as of now, I mean, you would think Louisville will have a shot. And then Georgia Tech starts the season. Louisville should be favored. It's not super easy, but, you know, Georgia Tech's got a first-year head coach as well. But it will be interesting. Indiana's not a complete pushover. I mean, Indiana's a team that has a lot of question marks, but it's not super easy. So it's a tough schedule. In the fact that there's a lot of games that Louisville could win or lose. It's an easy schedule because it's easier than most of the other schedules in college football, but it's still not like, again, it's not a pushover schedule. It's some tough games, but that's going to make it fun to watch Louisville this year because there's barely a game that you can just pencil off and say they can't win. A lot of these games are winnable. It will be fun to watch for sure. But to move on to the next topic, we're going to be getting to the record prediction for Louisville coming up. We've got breakout players and key players. So, definitely, this is where Austin's expertise of the Louisville Cardinals is going to come in. For the breakout players and key players on Louisville's team, who do you think that they are, and like how effective can they possibly be for Louisville this season, these certain players? I think Austin's accidentally muted right now. He's back.
Okay, I think I'm good now. So my key players and breakout players: wide receiver Amari Huggins Bruce. You know, he's 5'11", 190. He's a very talented guy. He can catch anything he throws away, especially in the red zone. He was a big target down there. I think he's going to be a big target for Jack Plummer. I think he will make a lot of things easier, and I think he'll be able to lead the next crop of receiving cores along the way. Wait, another wide receiver that I think could be key to this receiving core, Jaden Thompson. He's 6'2", 190, relatively close to Amari Huggins Bruce. I feel like he's a freshman, so he's new. He's going to be one of those guys, I think, because we've seen his speed, we've seen his raw talent. You know, hands could be a little desirable. You know, if it's working, if he can catch, he's one of the best catchers, I think, in the ACC. But if he's catching it, it's great. If he's not, then it could be disastrous. But he's definitely going to be a key prospect if we want any success in the wide receiver room. Him and Amari Huggins Bruce could be both 1,000-yard receivers. And then I think, you know, obviously Jack Plummer, he's got to be a key. If our offensive line is doing well, he's got to play well. He can't be throwing picks. He can't be doing anything out of the normal. He has got to stay almost perfect. Can't turn the ball over. That's the biggest key. And he's got to he's got to play almost perfect ball. Like, just reiterating, because at Cal, it was not good all the time. And I think in order for us to have success, we can't just say, let's run the ball and hope they can't stop us that day. That's not going to work. Now, a couple key players on the defensive side of the ball. Jarvis Brownlee Jr., defensive back, I think he's going to be a stud. I think he could possibly be in a couple award watches, how good he could possibly be. I think he's going to be the key guy on this defense. Him and TJ Carpenters. He's a linebacker. Two key guys, the defensive back and the linebacker. The two key pieces in the defenses, I think those two guys have potential to do great things, help our defense out. I think those are definitely some of my key players. What are your assessments on those, Jeffrey?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really disagree with any of your picks for sure. I mean, especially on offense, those two receivers. Bruce, he's going to be really good. I think that Jaden Thompson's going to be really good. Jordan, he was good last year. I mean, he was already doing really good in the bowl game. I mean, so I think that those guys are going to be really, really solid. And, definitely will assist Plummer, because he's a guy that he kind of feeds off other players. He's not really like a standout player on his own, but when he's got good players around him, like at times when Purdue had some good talent, he was able to have success. So I think that really is going to help him out. And then you talk about the defense. I agree with your selections. I would also point out cornerback Storm Duck, transfer from North Carolina. I think he could be solid. I mean, he was decent at North Carolina, but he's looking for, a new home. And that name, Storm Duck, that is a cool name. I think he's going to be storming his way to a great season. I feel like he's going to be good in the secondary. And Louisville, their secondary struggled. He could be good.
I'm glad you brought up Storm Duck. He was on my breakout list, which I'm going to get to. So, since Jeffrey pointed out, Storm Duck, defensive back, I watched some tape on him at North Carolina. He's a very good, talented guy. I think he was one of the sneaky pickups through the transfer portal.
Bad loss for
I think. Yes. I watched the film and I'm like, this guy's something else. If he can stay healthy, I think Storm Duck can make a huge, be a breakout player on the defensive side, especially when our corners and safeties, when we weren't getting turnovers, it was sometimes burnt city. Because Zay Flowers from Boston College last year in that game was just burning our corners left and right. He was basically beating us all by himself. Boston College's QB did not have to do anything in order to – he just threw it up to Zay Flowers and said, go for it. Jackson brought up in the comments, Juwan Jordan, running back, he's going to be a breakout player. He was great in that bowl game against Cincinnati. I think he's going to continue that into this season. He's going to terrorize some defenses. I think defenses are going to be loading the box, and I think that's going to open up more for our offense. Jamar Johnson, our tight end, he's going to be a breakout player. I think his best is yet to come. I think Brian Hudson on our O-line, one of the best O-linemen arguably in the ACC. I think he's got a bunch of potential. Micah Carter, D-line, a part of the sack corps. I think he's going to be a breakout. Popeye Williams on the D-line. A lot of our guys, key players and breakout players, are predicated on our defense, and I think that's going to be a lot of where we win our games at, if I'm going to be quite frank with you. I think our offense isn't going to flash as much as it has in years past, but I think now it's going to do that, and I think defense is going to win the day a lot. Those are my selections for our breakout players.
Again, definitely a good list. I agree with all the selections. Storm Duck especially. Again, I'm really, really can't wait to see him in a Louisville uniform this season. And to your point, the offense isn't going to be as flashy as it was last season because you don't have that quarterback. You don't have Malik Cunningham. You don't have Lamar Jackson. You don't have that guy that can just take over with an incredible play. Jack Plummer's more of a, quieter quarterback. I know that sounds insane, but he just doesn't make as many flashy plays. It's going to be a lot more dump-off passes, shorter throws, dink and dunk down the field. And he can throw deep a little bit, but not a lot. And I do feel like Louisville's defense is going to have to be a key factor in their success because a lot of teams in the ACCs, particularly like North Carolina, Miami at times has had struggles. Their defenses just aren't great. I know Louisville doesn't play North Carolina this year, but if Louisville's defense is solid this season, it will help against some of those better offenses because they do face them. Notre Dame, that's going to be a high-flying offense with Sam Hartman. If their defense isn't getting the job done, there's probably no way that Louisville's going to be able to keep up in points. So their defense has to be key. I think their offense will be more reserved this season, but they do have, some really good players on offense like the running back and wide receiver rooms. They'll be solid, but it's going to be predicated on how good Jack Plummer is. But definitely, I like your selection of breakout player, key players, and it just goes to show you that maybe Louisville has a bit more talent than we think on paper. They got some pretty solid guys. Up next, we got a little bit of just a little bit of fun here potentially, maybe a little bit craziness to even bring it up. But you never know. With that schedule, anything's possible. Does Louisville have a shot to win the ACC this year? Is there any possibility of it in your mind?
So this all depends on Florida State's outcome. And the key games that I mentioned, obviously Pittsburgh and NC State, because we're going to be in the thick of things. And what does North Carolina do? It's very interesting because if I was to give you a percentage right now, I would say 20%. I would say our chances. I think the thing that is Clemson's obviously probably going to be the best. Or they're probably going to be number one. Then it's going to be a fight for, okay, who gets number two? For Florida State, they've got some tricky games. They've got Pitt. They've got North Carolina as well, I believe. Yes, they do. They've got North Carolina. And, those are losable games. They've also got Miami. They've got Syracuse. They could lose those games, and that could cause a lot of, someone could move up. NC State, can they stay healthy? Are people believe in them, but can they stay healthy? Can they replace Devin Leary? Interesting questions. Can they win the games they're supposed to? With North Carolina, with them, Drake May we know is going to be phenomenal, but are they going to win the games that count, and are they going to win the games that they should? Because we all remember the Georgia Tech fiasco. Yes, it didn't cost them at the end, but it sure did hurt their playoff chances. What little did they have left? Mm-hmm. So that'd be interesting. There's a lot of things that have to play in favor, but I would say about a 20% chance. I just think, with the three-game stretch of Notre Dame, NC State, Pitt, especially the Pitt NC State, that's going to be the two games that kind of decide, okay, are we going to be able to possibly slip in at 2 somehow? Or maybe Clemson ain't as good as people think and Garrett Riley just doesn't have the chemistry, which would be crazy. I think Clemson's offense is probably going to be pretty dominant like it always is. And Garrett Riley's just going to make it even more scarier to deal with. But I honestly think 20% I think would be fair. Not to get too crazy, because a lot of things have to play out in our favor. If we can just beat our bottom dwellers in the ACC, I think we can have good chances as long as we win the important games.
Yeah, 20% is fair. If they had a harder schedule, I would probably, say maybe like 5% or less. I would say 10%. 20%, it's not impossible. They could do it. It's just, if this was like Jeff Brohm's third or fourth season, it'd be a lot easier for them to do it with the schedule. It's his first year. It's not impossible because, again, they've got a lot of winnable games. And if things break their way, you never know. Stranger things have happened. They could, find a way to win, 2 of those 3 tough games at NC State, Notre Dame, and at Pitt. They win 2 of those 3 and then maybe only just slip up one more time and somehow go 10-2. It'd be insane. But it's not impossible. Because they're going to be favored in a lot of these games. But it's still first-year head coach, new players. It's going to be tough. and they got a lot of sneaky games. But definitely, that's why we asked the question. There is a possibility. It's not impossible. So I would say about maybe 8 to 10%, somewhere in that range. But hey, a chance is better than having no chance at all. Now, to get even crazier before we get to the final record prediction, final thoughts, we got a couple realignment questions for the Louisville Cardinals, because you talk about all this realignment, all these teams leaving conferences, entering conferences. College football is never going to be the same the way that we're used to. I mean, you've got USC, UCLA, Oregon, Washington going to the Big Ten, and you've got all these teams going to the Big 12 like Colorado and Arizona. It's crazy. So where does that leave the ACC? Because there's been no movement with the ACC. No teams left. There's been rumors about Clemson and Florida State leaving possibly, and other teams. So the first question is, where would Louisville go? What conference would they go to if they left the ACC? This is a tough question because there's about possibly 2 or 3 answers. But where do you see them going if they left the ACC?
So, for me personally, I think there's 2 answers here. Either the Big 12 or we go back to the American Conference, which was originally the Big East.
Mm-hmm.
I think, honestly, if we went to the Big 12, I think we'd have a rougher time, of course, because now that you add Cincinnati, BYU, Houston, and then Utah's coming along, and then, TCU's still going to be there, Baylor. You're losing Texas, Oklahoma, which is a big blow on a national stage. But I think if we join the Big 12, I think we would still be competitive, but I just don't think it would be as much as, say, we are now in the ACC. If we join the American, I feel like we can possibly win that conference more often than not, just because of who's in it. And I think that could be the best fit too, geologically possibly. But those are the 2 answers I would give. It's very interesting. What people may say, why not the Big Ten? And it's like, you want to try to fit in geologically, and plus, no offense to no Big Ten teams, but you could keep Ohio State, Michigan. You could keep USC, UCLA, Oregon, Washington. I don't want to play them. I don't want that on my schedule. I might want to play them in a New Year's Six, but I don't want to play them year round like that. No, thank you. I'll stay over here where we only have to deal with Clemson most of the time. But that would be my 2 answers if I had to predict if they left. But I don't think the ACC is going to come crumbling down. I think we'll be able to keep it together, because I think Florida State, there's been these rumors, they're leaving, they're going to go to the Big Ten. I think once they realize, oh, shoot, look who we got to play and look who we're up against, they'll be like, oh, we'll stay over here. We'll deal with Clemson. And I think the ACC is going to be around a lot longer.
Yeah, a lot of teams didn't, think of that, though, like Texas, Oklahoma, and USC, UCLA, Oregon, Washington. They're not thinking about that in the conferences they're joining. They're going to be making a lot more money, but their schedules are getting a lot tougher. It's going to be a lot harder for them to win games. But to your point, I mean, I would have to agree. I would say that basically the American would be a bad option, only because of the fact that the American's weaker than it was a couple years ago, because they just lost the teams that they did to the Big 12. The American's a good option if they were what they were a few years ago. Teams they had. And Louisville could dominate. It'd be great. Like, dominating on the field is great. Like, put Indiana in the MAC. I know some people would say Indiana probably still wouldn't win the MAC, but it doesn't matter. I mean, more than likely, they'd still win the MAC, most of the time. And same thing with Louisville. They probably win the American most of the time. That's great, but you're not going to make the money. Big 12 will be more viable. And like Jackson mentioned as well, you do have that rivalry with Cincinnati. And also, Louisville is a good basketball school, which would make sense for the Big 12 as well, because of the fact that the Big 12 is a great basketball conference. So I would say the Big 12 is probably the most viable option if they left the ACC to go to the Big 12. It wouldn't be terrible. I mean, the Big 10, I think that Louisville could fit. I mean, it's not insane. I mean, I don't know if academically maybe they're on the level. I don't think they're as high as like some of those schools like that. But I do think that overall Louisville to the Big 12 would make sense. But that's only if the ACC imploded. And I don't think that they're going to implode right now. Now, does that mean that they're never going to implode? No, I think there's a possibility that they could if Clemson, Florida State do leave, and the ACC's in really bad shape, and then Louisville's going to have to make a decision on whether they're staying in the ACC or go to the Big 12. But, I mean, hey, it's like Jackson just said. It's not any more insane than Rutgers being in the Big 10. I mean, Rutgers in the Big 10, Louisville could be in the Big 10. And Jackson also, I wish the Big 12 could get Memphis. That would be a good addition. But, yeah, I don't know.
I think it's very interesting because, like you said, I think the ACC is going to be fine for a while. They ain't going to blow up like the Pac-12. You know, you never want to say never. It might happen. But I think we'll be around at least for another 3 years, maybe 5. I think there's still some equity there. And plus the Big 10 and SEC and Big 12, they're running out of spaces. You can't fit every team in there.
They're trying.
So someone's got to – they're trying to, but you can't fit everyone. Someone's got to stay somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Now, next question, which we kind of answered in a way, but for me, it's a very easy answer. What will happen to Louisville if they stay in the ACC? If the ACC stays as it currently is, nothing. It's to be exactly as it's always been. Things are going to be fine. And, Louisville staying in the ACC makes complete sense because there's no reason to leave. The ACC is in good enough shape. They got enough good teams. They're making enough money. No problem. But this question is going to come into play, though, if the ACC did implode. If Clemson, Florida State did leave, North Carolina left, if Miami left for other conferences, what would happen to Louisville if they stay in the ACC then? Because that would be a problem potentially.
Yes, I think right now we're fine. We get good TV numbers. People still want to watch us. We still sell out tickets and we do everything. But like you said, if the scenario comes up, Clemson's gone, Florida State's gone, they took Miami, and you're just left with us and maybe NC State, Pittsburgh. I think the ACC won't – I think it'll hold up. I know as crazy as that sounds. I still think it'll hold up just for a little bit, but it won't hold up as long because then eventually Pittsburgh, Syracuse, NC State, us, we're going to be like, this is a losing battle. I think it'll hold up for a little bit because Pittsburgh, NC State, us, maybe if Notre Dame happened to join us, there'd be enough there that they would get enough money. Plus, we would be on NBC because of Notre Dame. And maybe work that deal out when the TV contracts come up. I think it would be around. We would still be around, but it wouldn't be as powerful as it once was. I think, like you said, if they left, though, it would kind of be turning into, okay, who really, like Clemson and Florida State and Miami have kind of been the heart and souls of the ACC. You lose them, you kind of lose your conference. Like with UCLA and USC, once they were lost, the Pac-12 shambled. And it's a shame that Washington State, Oregon State, Stanford, Cal are kind of like, what do we do now? Especially Oregon State. They're finally trending in the right direction. Jonathan Smith has got them guys playing very well. And it sucks that happened. But it could happen here as well if every team gets plucked, like you said, Jeffrey. But I think if Louisville, if that scenario ever arises, I think eventually we would just say, let's go to the American if they're still around, or if nothing else, let's go to the Big 12 and call it a day.
I mean, they would definitely have to. I mean, because it's getting to the point where the Pac-12 is basically gone, and you have the Big 12 that's done everything that they possibly can to stay afloat, which is why they added, the American schools, Houston, UCF, Cincinnati, and they added BYU. Now they're adding Colorado and Arizona, which Colorado was already in the Big 12, but they're getting them back. Arizona, Arizona State, all those teams. Utah. And you talk about the Pac-12 being gone. Well, the ACC, they're fine right now. But again, if they lose Clemson, they lose Florida State, lose Miami, it's nothing against Louisville or Pitt or NC State, North Carolina, some teams like that. They're good. They are good teams, but they're not enough to keep the ACC viable. And unless the ACC was able to pluck Notre Dame, which is seemingly not as likely as it once was, because Notre Dame would be like going to a conference that their best team that we're going to be facing is maybe Louisville. That wouldn't be great. And they probably either stay independent or go to the Big Ten at that point. And, yeah, I mean, the ACC could implode, and I would agree. I think Louisville should go to the Big 12, but then you'd be getting to a point where you just got the Big 10 and you've got the SEC, and it's like, okay, if you're in those conferences, you're in great shape, unless you're obviously the bottom teams and you're losing all the time. You're still making a lot of money. And then all of the other teams, basically the cast outs, they're in the Big 12, the teams that couldn't make the cut per se. And that's not a bad thing, because, I mean, the Big 12 will be better than being left for dead in the ACC or the Pac-12, but that's kind of almost where we're getting at if the ACC imploded. It hasn't happened yet, and again, it's insane we're talking about this, because 5 years ago, we wouldn't have been talking about this. It'd be like, really? Louisville leaving the ACC? Louisville going to the Big 12? The Pac-12's gone? It's history? I mean, it's insane. The realignment has completely changed the sport forever, and it's fun to talk about in a way, but it's sad too, because I like the conferences the way they were. We've talked about this at length before, so not to get back into it about why it should go back to the 90s and all that. I've talked about it before. But it's fun to talk about realignment, but it is hurting a lot of conferences, and it's, in a way, destroying the fabric of those conferences the way we're used to. But it is what it is. But at least for now, Louisville's still in the ACC, and that's going to stay like that just for the near foreseeable future.
Now, I will say before we move on, I would say you also have to factor in basketball in this as well. I know this is a football preview, but the basketball, which is the fabric of Louisville, what we've been known for mostly, if we go to the Big 12, we're going to have to play Kansas, who basically are the biggest brand in all of college basketball, you can argue. As in football, the Big 12 as is now, it's a who's who of that. Basketball, okay, I got to play Kansas. I got to play Texas Tech. I got to play these teams that are really good and are arguably national championship contenders. In football, it's completely different, because you're losing Texas, you're losing Oklahoma, like I've said. And in football, there's much more fluctuation, and you're not as sure. I thought that'd be an interesting point to bring up, especially when you're a basketball school. How that would factor in on the basketball side of things.
Oh, yeah, because, I mean, you talk about, all these teams moving to different conferences. I mean, we're only looking at football, but, yeah, I mean, think about Colorado going back to the Big 12. And their basketball, what are they going to do? They're struggling in the Pac-12 in basketball. And now you're going to the Big 12, where you're going to be facing all these teams. It's even worse. I mean, Louisville's going to get better. I mean, they're going to get better. They're going to, get it all together. They have this little blip with, the NCAA violations and all that. They're going to get it together, and they'll be fine in the future in basketball. And they'll compete in the Big 12 with those top teams. Maybe not beat them all the time, but they'll compete. And it's going to be probably good for Louisville if they move to the Big 12. It would be good, I think, in the long run. But for teams like Colorado and you talk about like Oregon and Washington going to the Big 10 in basketball, I mean, Oregon's solid. Sometimes Washington, though, they've been down in basketball badly lately. They've been really struggling. So how are they going to perform against those teams? People don't really look at basketball as well either. But I do think Louisville would fit in the Big 12 for sure.
Yeah, and the final point I'd like to make on that is you got to look at it from both sides of the spectrum. You can't just say, this is football. Oh, we got to worry about this, but basketball. I think, like you said, if we can just stay out of trouble and not get caught partying anymore, so to speak, which is ridiculous, won't get into that. We don't turn this into one of those. It's just very interesting because it takes you down an interesting avenue, because, like basketball, you're competing with Kansas for all the 5-star recruits and everything else. Football, go to the Big 12, yeah. You'll be competing with TCU and Texas Tech and those guys in Utah coming up. But you have to look at it on both sides of the spectrum. And that's for any sport. Look at Indiana. Indiana, they got to deal with the football side of it and the basketball side of it. It's just all very interesting and all takes its own course, because let's be honest. We're heading for 2 or 3 super conferences. And the playoffs coming up. The expansion of that coming up. It's very interesting. College basketball, they're now doing, after this year, 25 automatic bids where it's no longer 31. College football, they're saying, oh, this 12 team's going to work. With the way we're heading, we might as well just turn it into March Madness so everybody can make it. Because I know that seems a little ridiculous, but you get my point. It's not going to stay at 12. It's not going to stay at 12 long. It's probably going to go to 16, maybe even 24, maybe even 32 possibly, just because of all the realignment. And it's all because the SEC and Big Ten are probably going to be dominant for the longest time. If you look at it from the football perspective, the SEC is probably going to have 10, at least 9 out of the 12 next year in the playoffs. And that's crazy to think because you're going to have LSU, you're going to have Bama, you're going to have Georgia. Who knows who else might be in there? The Big Ten obviously has got Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State. And then after that, it's kind of like Oregon, Washington, USC. It's all very interesting. But for at least right now, the ACC is intact, and we'll be playing some more football in it. And who knows, maybe we'll finally beat Clemson.
Definitely. And we're about to get to Louisville's final, record prediction for 2023. Before we move on, interesting point by Clint Mosey. He brings up Duke's in a weird spot. That's a great point because Duke's an example of a team and a program that you look at mostly just through basketball, but their football's gotten better. But if you just take into account their academics, they make perfect sense in the Big Ten. Because the Pac-12 and the Big Ten and the ACC have more of the schools that are better in academics. And academically, Duke makes sense in the Big Ten. The Pac-12 is basically gone at this point almost, so Duke's not going to go there. And plus, that would be insane if the ACC imploded. So the only conference that makes sense academically would be the Big Ten. But on the hardwood, it would make sense for them to go to the Big 12 because basketball is good in the Big 12. And Duke would fit in the Big 12 as long as they stay really good at basketball. I mean, they probably will, at least for the foreseeable future. They're still recruiting at a high level. So I feel like Duke fits in the Big 12 in basketball. But again, they don't really fit in either, though, because the Big 12 is in an academics conference. A lot of their schools are lower in academics. Duke would not fit. Duke fits in the Big Ten if they had to move. But would the Big Ten even take them? Because they're probably not making enough money for them to be worth it. So Duke is a team in a weird spot. Where would they go? Those are the two conferences they could go to. But they don't really fit in either for various reasons. So basically, realignment is getting crazy. It's going to keep getting crazier as long as teams keep moving. But like you said, for now, ACC's intact. Louisville's in pretty good shape because they're still in the ACC and nothing's happened. And hopefully for the ACC and Louisville's sake, it will stay that way for a while longer. So we got the final 2023 record prediction for Louisville and final thoughts. Louisville, pretty fairly easy schedule, not too bad. But what do you think Louisville's record prediction will be in 2023?
So I'm going to be faithful to my prediction I made on my ACC prediction show on my channel, which, by the way, I got great content coming out, which we'll get to that in a minute. Not to self-promote ahead, but I picked 8-4 and 5-3. I think we're going to start 4-0, and I think we're going to lose at NC State. I think Notre Dame's going to beat us. I think we lose at Pitt. So there's 3 right there. And then I think, as much as I don't like to say this, I really don't. But I think, see, that's 3 losses right there. I think, honestly, we might slip up to either Miami or possibly Kentucky gets us again. I'm going to say 8-4 and 5-3 in conference. I think that's a fair assessment. I don't want to be too optimistic and say, oh, we're going 10-2. We're going to tear the world down. Look out, here we come. I'm going to say 8-4, going to be faithful to my prediction. Take after example from the young man next to me. When you make a prediction, try to stick to it. I almost wanted to predict them as 7-5, just so you don't get your expectations too high. But I think 8-4 is fair. Could we beat Notre Dame? Sure, because their schedule, the way we're sandwiched in there, we could be. maybe a trap game? Could we be them coming off a big win, celebrating too much? We could get them. I don't think we're going to go to Pittsburgh and beat them. That's a game I don't see us winning. I think we should beat Duke, Virginia Tech, Virginia, at Miami. It should be interesting. What Miami are we going to get? Are we going to get the Miami that plays Clemson tough? Sometimes we're going to get the Miami that loses to Middle Tennessee State.
And has
And
8
by the way,
turnovers against Duke.
yes, 8 turnovers against Duke. I'm glad you brought that up. And I'm sure Miami fans love that you brought that up. So that's going to be interesting. And then Kentucky, please beat them. Please. I beg you, can we beat Kentucky? I'm tired of them saying they're the best in football and basketball. We used to own football. That used to be our calling card. Now they've taken both. We need something here. It's rough. It's rough out in the streets. But yeah, I think 8-4, 5-3. What do you think, Jeffrey? Is that a good prediction, or are you thinking a little lower, a little higher, or does that sound about right?
I think it's a solid prediction. I mean, 8-4 is not crazy, especially with the schedule. It's not outlandish. A lot of games that they can win, a lot of games they can slip up in. But I'd have to go with Jackson's prediction of 7-5. I think they're going to lose 5 games. If this wasn't Jeff Brohm's first season, I would probably go 8-4, maybe even 9-3 if it was like year 3, year 4, and he's got, maybe some more talent than he has right now. He's got some really good players, but maybe not enough depth potentially at some positions. Maybe later in the year he could get some injuries. Who knows? But I mean, I think they're going to start out possibly 4-0. I think they can do that. Even beating Indiana, I think they can do that. And then those next 3 games, I mean, I don't want to pick them to lose all 3, but all 3 of those games are really hard. And I mean, even if they beat like an NC State, they could still lose to an Indiana. So I mean, it's like you swap that. I don't see Notre Dame or Pittsburgh. And then it's like between Duke, Miami, Kentucky, I could see them losing 2 of those 3 possibly. So that would put them at 7-5, and either 5-3 or 4-4. In the conference, either or. I think that they'll have a solid season. They're going to make a bowl game, and they could go 8-4. You could be right, but I'd have to go with 7-5. I think that too many tricky games, and a lot of those teams just have more, experienced head coaches at that school and maybe more talent. So I think it will be a lot of close games for Louisville, but 7-5, 8-4. But I'd have to go with 7-5.
Yeah, that's very interesting. 8-4. The interesting thing is, though, I will say this: we do get a nice break after Pitt. We get 2 weeks off to prepare for Duke, so that would help our case a little bit better. I just wish those 3 games weren't sandwiched in the way they are. I wish maybe we could have started, 2 weeks, September 29th, Friday, you go at NC State, right? Maybe we could have moved that up to September 16th, moved Indiana a week ahead, took off Murray State, and then maybe put Notre Dame towards the end, and then maybe sandwich Pitt in between like a Virginia Tech. Help us out somewhat, but, it is what it is, especially for Louisville. We always get the short end of the stick. No matter what sport it is, they just don't like us. So it is all very interesting. But I think 8-4 is solid. I think with the roster and the talent we have, I think as long as we have no slip-ups, I think we could be a very dangerous team. I could even maybe see us making a very good bowl this year. And who knows, we may end up playing Oregon State in a bowl this year. And Connor and Clinton, we can finally see who's the better team. You never know. But that's my prediction for that.
Yeah, definitely. I love how you mentioned the short end of the stick. The Louisville fan, they don't like us. A lot of fans feel that way. They just don't like us. They're out to get us. It's all conspiracy. It's funny. I love it. It's hilarious. And I mean, yeah, there is ways you can make Louisville's schedule easier, but a lot of people as well could say the same thing, that, hey, man, my schedule, if we had this game here, we would have won that game. It's crazy. So I think Louisville's, besides that 3-game stretch, pretty solid schedule, but I just definitely thought that was pretty funny for sure. But I guess we're about done. And I mean, definitely, I really appreciate you for coming on, Austin. It was a lot of fun talking about your Louisville Cardinals. I think they'll have a really solid season, but definitely tell people where you can find you. The link is on the screen.
Yes. So recently, I just started Sports Talk with Austin. You know, something creative, and I love talking all things college basketball, college football, some NBA. Make sure to check me out. I've got plenty of future things coming up. I got week 1 pick'ems coming out very, very soon. I've got college basketball previews on the way. Jeffrey may be a part of North Carolina, Indiana, possibly. You'll get to see his beautiful face again on screen. We'll be previewing all that, talk about the season ahead. We'll be talking about, in the NBA, previewing their season upcoming and talking about how my team, the Denver Nuggets and OKC Thunder, can we repeat as champs? Can the Thunder do good again? All that'll be very interesting. That's all coming soon to you. But be sure to like, comment, subscribe to this man right here. Does excellent work. I appreciate his time and effort, and I look forward to seeing him back doing this again with me at some point on my channel or his. It's great stuff all around. Even though he's an Indiana, North Carolina fan, I still love him, but he has some flaws there. We'll work on that, Jeffrey. We'll work on that. You can't help that that's your team. We can't help that, but that doesn't change the fact that you're a very, very intelligent young man. So take it away.
I really appreciate that. You know your stuff as well. Really knowledge about Louisville and a lot of other teams. And I like Louisville. Nothing against Louisville at all. I like Indiana, North Carolina, possibly a little bit better. I'm not super crazy on that, but definitely for sure. I got to get to the chat, though. There's a lot of chat comments tonight. Again, appreciate everyone for stopping by. Most importantly, you got Jackson. I really appreciate the super chat. Means a lot. He says it's going to be fun watching Louisville this season. I definitely agree, and they've got a lot of hype this season. It's going to be fun to watch for, but again, really appreciate the super chat. Jacob's season, he came on early, said Louisville's going to be nice with the new coach. Wyatt stopped by, said Aaron Rodgers win the Super Bowl, then retire. That's out of left field, not even what we're talking about, but definitely, hey, you never know. Maybe the Jets will get it done. But appreciate you stopping by. Again, it was awesome to see Mark. I really appreciate that. I will have to say, Jacob Stevenson, what do you think about Alabama this year? That's a really good question. I mean, I did make a video on that. I don't know if you're still here or not, but I made a video on Alabama football probably about a month ago, and I have my record prediction there. I will put it in the chat if you're still here, if you want to see that. But I think Alabama's going to be really solid, but they do have some, quarterback question marks, probably around 10-2. Going to be interesting, though. Clint Moses, he was here for a while tonight. I really appreciate him stopping by. He had a lot of great comments that we definitely talked about, discussing Louisville, and definitely Jackson as well. Again, appreciate him for being here all night as well. But it's going to be awesome for college football. We're really close. Only a couple days away for week 1 start, basically around less than 2 days now because it's already Wednesday. And you've got some great games coming on Thursday. It's going to be awesome. Week 0 is come and gone. Nothing really substantial there, but it's going to be awesome. And again, it was awesome to do this preview of Louisville.
Now Jeffrey?
Go ahead, man.
But before you go, though, we have to mention now. We know you have some Trojan fans watching this, and I know the Oregon State fans. They're going to love to hear this. USC's defense. I thought they had it together, Jeffrey. I thought they had it together. What do you mean? According to our good buddy Tim Prangley, love him to death, he said USC's going to have it together and it's all going to be fixed. Well, it didn't look fixed. Alex Grinch, he drawing up an exotic blitz on 3rd and 22. I know that's not the topic at hand, but I thought I'd mention that. It's all fun around here. Love you, Tim. Just picking at you. But should be interesting. Interesting for sure. And take it away, Jeffrey. I just had to throw that in there.
Oh, you're good. The defense, I mean, they gave up 28 to San Jose State, which isn't that great. I mean, you'd think they'd win 56-7 to 7. But hey, I mean, their offense was great. Caleb Williams was great. Defense still has to get better if they want to win a title. But hey, it was just week 0, not even week 1 yet, week 0, you know. Maybe they'll get it figured out. But week 1's going to be awesome. Some great games. UNC, South Carolina, Florida State, LSU. A lot of great games. Even Louisville, Georgia Tech. It's going to be awesome. Looking forward to it. But again, appreciate you for coming on. Thanks, everyone, for being in the chat. It was a lot of fun tonight, and we'll definitely be back soon to talk some more college football. I'm going to have a preview coming up of the week 1 game soon. I think Austin will on his channel. So it's going to be awesome. And again, thanks for being here, everybody. It was fun talking Louisville.